Welcome, everyone. I'm Anthony Raimundo. I'm with Lowenstein Sandler. Welcome to Venture Crush Austin. We're so glad you can make it. I want to say a special thanks to Galvanize for co-hosting with us and letting us share their beautiful space tonight. So while our panelists kind of put their last thoughts together, we're going to let a few companies here in Austin do a little shout out, tell you a little bit about themselves. Our first up is Jean Ann Booth. She's with Unaliware, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about what that is.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here with you guys tonight. I'm Jean Ann. After my previous companies sold to Texas Instruments and Apple, and then I retired, I came out of retirement to start Unaliware because my mom was turning 80, and she wasn't willing to wear today's emergency alert products because they're ugly. They're limited to use in the home unless they're tethered to a smartphone, and that big help button is socially stigmatizing. It was the focus groups who first called our Kanega watch a wearable OnStar for people because we provide discrete support for falls, medication reminders, and a guard against wandering with Guide Me Home assistance using an easy speech interface rather than buttons. Unlike a traditional medical alert, we go wherever you go inside in the house and outside of the house, and you don't need a smartphone because it's actually built into the watch. One other thing that everybody really loves is the fact that we have a patent-pending battery system in the band, which means that you never have to take your watch off to charge. You simply replace the battery, and off you go. Since you never take it off, you never forget to put it back on. We're actually Austin-based. We've raised about $7.4 million. We are in our user experience test. The update that I got right before I came out here is that we have 47 folks across the US who are wearing their very first Kanega watches, and we hope to be in the market at the end of the year. Thank you. We're selling B2B2C through the traditional channel, so you'll know when they're there.
Terrific. Thank you, Jean Ann. All right, next we have Volk Co-op, which is founded by Watson and Reza, who's now part of their biz dev team. He's going to come up and tell you a little bit about their group.
I need no introduction. Well, thanks. So as you guys know, my name is Reza Puri. I've been running a software development shop, GenovaCap, for the past like 8 or 9 years, and now I am making an announcement. I'm joining Volk. These guys basically do the same thing, except bigger, better, faster, stronger. Really big on the DevOps side for any kind of like software development needs, also mobile and web app development. Watson, would you like to say something? Yeah?
Yeah, we're a software cooperative here in town, very passionate about performance tuning, so if you have any performance issues with your startups, come talk with us.
Yeah. And thanks, Lowenstein Sandler, for having us here tonight. Always appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Terrific. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Kelly with Redenim.
Hi, my name is Kelly Ernst. I'm a former developer from JP Morgan on Wall Street, and I am the founder and CEO of Redenim. And we're the easiest way for you to find your new favorite pair of jeans. And our vision is pretty straightforward. I want you to get in my pants. Because if you want an awesome pair of premium jeans, you're looking to spend $150 or more, and you have to endure the process of going and shopping for them, which nobody likes to do. So we offer the ultimate solution. We intersect customer data points to help find the right size and style for your body type. We then send our customers 3 pairs of premium jeans to try at home for 30 days. You can keep the ones that work and send back the rest. But our goal is to keep you out of the fitting rooms and into the jeans that you love. Thanks.
Thanks, Kelly. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our first panel. Valeska is going to moderate tonight, Planning for an Acquisition. Valeska.
Thanks. I'm going to keep the bios really short, so we're fast. To my right, we're just going to go in this order, is Ben Burkhardt. He's a partner at Lowenstein Sandler. He represents, mainly does M&A work, and he's involved 4 of the Fortune's top 20 technology companies on the unicorn list for 2016, including Uber Technologies, Airbnb, Snap, and WeWorks companies. Next to him is Worley. Worley co-heads Honest Dollar with an investment management division of Goldman Sachs. In 2015, he founded Honest Dollar, and I think everybody knows what it is, and sold it to Goldman Sachs. Prior to that, he was a co-founder of Chaotic Moon. Now we're going next. We've got Rick Fink. oversees operations and business development and client relations for post-closing issues on M&A deals. Rick has over 3 decades of advisory experience in venture-backed and PE M&A. Then we have Vivek Sagi. Vivek is a serial entrepreneur and startup advisor. He does tech gadgets, he's a food junkie, consumer and mobile app connoisseur. He's building a new mobile team at IoT Apps in Austin for Amazon Business and is growing the enterprise team to build new marketplaces on Amazon.com. And then we have Nitin. Nitin is a principal at Shasta Ventures. He's passionate about enterprise software and mobile. He's looking at investing opportunities in application, platform, infrastructure software. Nitin is a big advocate of open source technologies and is a member of the Open Source Initiative. And I went in wrong order. I'm so sorry. The back there, I was like, we're running out of people. Okay. All right, I'm out of bio. So just to kind of step back and we're going to start with kind of this concept of what is an exit opportunity. So what does it really mean to be an M&A deal? Because a lot of people just think of it as buying and selling a company, but there's a lot of different structures, acquirers, and types. So I'm going to kick that out to you guys. Anybody want? Nitin, I'm going to pick on you.
Sure. Firstly, thanks for having me on the panel and also Galvanize for hosting us. So in terms of kind of as we think about exits and I think about acquisitions and so forth, the number one question is, you kind of brought it up, Valeska, is that, what are the different avenues? And oftentimes it's the conversations that I have with entrepreneurs all the time, that it's not just simply a larger tech company like Amazon acquiring some of the startups, is to really think about it a little bit broader than that as well. There's, kind of usual suspects like Google and Amazon and Facebook and so forth. But there's quite a few, and this is happening increasingly quite a bit, is there's quite a few, what I like to call kind of the classic industrials that are looking to buy companies, the companies like GE and Honeywell, that are increasingly kind of looking to make acquisitions in those, in technology startups. I think there's a stat, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but like 80 of the Fortune 100 enterprises have an innovation department in and around San Francisco, and they're hunting for startups. So, I mean, that's the way they're kind of thinking about growing some of their business as well. So don't quote me on the 80 number, but I'm pretty sure it's kind of close to that. And then there's also kind of thinking about a little bit broader than that as well. And increasingly, we're seeing a lot of sort of financial sponsors. So, kind of old-fashioned private equity firms are kind of reinventing themselves. Firms like Vista Equity and Thoma Bravo and stuff, and they're also sort of looking at different avenues for buying startups and sort of platformizing them together and putting it in a single platform, if you will. And lastly, there's increasingly, and we haven't seen a lot of the actual acquisitions by foreign buyers. So there's a lot of Chinese buyers are kind of looking at companies, and particularly strong technology buyers in the US. But we have seen them actually bid up a lot of prices in some of the companies about it. So I think those are the different avenues to kind of keep in mind as you're thinking about, broadly speaking, an exit. And so kind of a landscape, if you will.
And Ben, you also see kind of unusual things like ABC deals and distressed deals and other things as well.
What's been amazing to me is just to see the universe of acquirers has shifted over the last 10 years. You used to have 3 or 4 types of acquirers, and now you have 12 or 15 types of acquirers. Everyone thinks they're a technology company now, so you'll have very staid brick and mortar companies who, as Nitin was saying, are looking for the thing that's going to innovate their business or drive revenue toward other parts of their business going forward. And that's been amazing. It's been horrible for valuations. It's potentially a bubble that people are talking about, and then when it is a bubble, that gives way to distressed acquisitions. You have acquisitions out of bankruptcy, companies who ran out of runway. It's really hard to quantify how many different types of acquirers there are out there right now. It's a seller's market, if you have an idea.
And I think one particular interesting type of buyer is the acqui-hire from a big company, which Vivek is uniquely positioned to talk about, being at Amazon.
So let me actually ask a show of hands, how many of you are in the early stages of your startup?
Define early.
So that's always a great question, right? So I think you're always early in a startup, right? I've been on both sides of acquisition. I think the best thing to think about is when somebody acquires you, it's not always on your terms. They're either requiring you for your technology, they're requiring you for your customer base, they're requiring you for some intellectual property that you have. And speaking for Amazon, or I think Mr. mentioned, with any of the big companies, as we're growing pretty rapidly, we're looking for companies that are fitting the technology profile more. So we're looking to hire technology teams in particular domains. Machine learning, big data is a big one. I think mobile is another one. But we're looking to grow through acquisitions from that perspective. I think in terms of exits, right? I think a lot of you might be still thinking about fundraising and not thinking about exits. Exits is not something that you plan for when you need it. It's something that you just do throughout running your startup, and if the opportunity ever comes up where you can control their destiny, then you be prepared for it.
Yeah, I just added that. It's interesting. I get questions all the time from people about, hey, when should I be looking for an exit? And I think that was well put. It's really, you're always looking for an exit. You always should be conducting your company with a view towards creating value that can lead to that potential. The one thing that I would say is that, and I come from the venture capital industry, and I'm a big advocate of raising venture capital, but I think one mistake that I see founders make a lot is they don't really plan their financing strategy necessarily around their business plan very well. And I think that as early stage companies, this mantra that you're in it to just create value and then whatever happens is a little bit trite, because I've seen a lot of situations where founders have gone down that path, raised financing, and I don't know too many founders who've ended up with a greater percentage of the company after they did their financing. And that can make a difference at the end of the day. If you're, it might make perfect sense to go down the path of raising money and creating value and everything else, but it also, just from an individual standpoint, might make perfect sense for you to be thinking about, if it comes up, an exit that allows you to sort of generate a greater personal return for yourself than going down the financing path where you can do the math and you can figure out, geez, if I own 50% of a company that exits at sort of $30 million, I'm doing a lot better than if I own 10% of a company that exits at $100 million. So it's just something to think about as you're doing these companies, trying to think through your financing strategy, what the inflection points are, and how that can lead to an M&A exit that could actually work out better for yourselves.
So Rick's point is kind of a broader concept too, in that when you're planning for a financing, it's planning for a financing and planning for an exit potentially. So you could be doing both, you could be doing one or the other, but it's something to plan for. So but we're going to go ahead and switch gears now, and we're going to talk about how to prepare the company for an exit. And what we're going to do, instead of doing a Q&A on the back end, if you guys want to raise hands and we can pick you and do it kind of interactively as we're going. But we're going to go ahead and start with kind of how you understand your market and how that plays into long-term planning and short-term planning. Anybody want to kick off, or I'm going to pick on somebody again?
So I'll kick that off, but I want to make one comment about exiting. How many of you are at a startup that you foresee exiting through an acquisition? That's a depressing number compared to how many of you were at a startup a moment ago. But that's not even realistic, right? You have as much chance of being acquired as I do of getting hit by a small meteorite on the way back to WeWork tonight. It is very hard, and my advice to you as an entrepreneur, so I've done 18 exits in 24 months. I did 3 that I founded within a year, and I'll tell you what the secret is. It's all about the market question you just asked and the timing, but most importantly, everything these guys said is incredibly important. It's how you structure it. I've seen so many entrepreneurs have a great deal. They get somebody who's interested in the acquisition, they go through diligence, and the deal gets killed because of whatever. It could be a dirty cap table, it could be IP agreements, it could be a million things. But there's 2 things I want to say on that. Number one is, when does a smart entrepreneur take the money off the table? And the answer is when there's money on the table, because that is a really, really rare event. Inc. magazine is a romance novel for business nerds, okay? Half the shit you read in there isn't even real. And the other thing, you nailed it, right? Because I really loved what you just said, because I have a chart and I can tell you, 0 to $25 million, there are about 27,000 companies that can buy you for cash without blinking an eye, worldwide. 25 to 50, that number drops in half. Over 100, you're at a couple of thousand, realistically. Now that's not even including your market. That's just companies like Nabisco could buy your new robot startup. Like that's not even putting it into any kind of context, okay? So I hear all these entrepreneurs that come and they pitch me and they're like, it's $1 billion idea. And it's like, more than likely it's not, right? And I used to be on the other side and I used to listen to guys like this and I used to be like, man, I hate these guys, right? Like, what are they talking? But the fact is there's a mechanics to it. So the market preparation is all about timing, but it's not timing in the market. There's three things every entrepreneur needs. They need market timing, they need personal timing, and they need luck, right? And so the market timing, with Chaotic Moon, for example, I founded the iPhone Dev Camps in 2006. Everybody there was like, mobile apps are gonna be huge, we're gonna start a company. I didn't start mine until 2010, right? And so this first to market, first mover advantage, all these things, pioneers get arrows in the back, all right? So that's not always a good thing. Every market timing is different for every single industry, depending on how much money is being pumped into it, et cetera, et cetera. The personal timing is where you're entering it, right? And it's like, think about as being an entrepreneur, like being on an airplane, right? There's all of this romance to it, right? And you're flying, there's a seatbelt, there's a sign, it's like, there's a stewardess bringing you drinks, all this stuff, right? And it's all convinced, it's all social engineering to make you think that what you're doing is okay and safe. And what you're really doing is strapping yourself to thousands of pounds of jet fuel and flying through the air at hundreds of miles an hour, right? That's starting a startup. And just like being on a plane, you need to know where all of your exits are, right? You have to put your mask on first before you can help people around you, and you gotta know where all the exits are. And when you get an exit, you have to explore it. But the preparation for the market is different in every case, but there's a market timing. Think of it like riding a wave, like surfing. When you start paddling and you catch the wave, right? Then you have to stand up, right? So that's just catching the market timing. That's standing, that's kind of paddling and catching the wave at the right time. The personal timing is standing up, on the board. But it's every single case is different. And you can't go read some book or some magazine. There's no magic formula. You have to do the work. It's data, not drama. You have to go understand that market better than anybody. You have to understand who's coming into it, who's going out, where the pain points are. And just like you're designing a product to solve a customer pain point, you have to design a company that solves a pain point for a company that may acquire you. And it's, by the way, really cheap to build companies now. So that, that might not be, as big a deal as you think.
And, sorry.
Well, I had a question about that. How does this go with luck favors the well-prepared? I feel like I can super prepare myself for luck to happen. Right? Do you know what I'm saying though?
Yeah. I mean, look, being an entrepreneur is about living in a constant state of risk. Startups don't like significant others or families or houses or cars or any of that, right? You couldn't lose all of those things, and I've done that. Being prepared, it only gets you so far. When that luck moment happens, luck is also a formula. Luck is about being in the right place at the right time. That's what you need, and you have to make sure you're in those places. And it may be this room because one of these guys is looking to fund something. Maybe Amazon's going to buy something. You never know when it's going to be, but you can calculate those things, right? Every startup I do spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet. Like, here are the influencers in the market. Here's where they're going to be. I've bought stock of one share of a stock of a company that's not up here, but they bought somebody that's up here. That just so I could go to the annual shareholders meeting, noting that I could get myself in the right place, right? It's the preparation gets you so far, but you have to be out there hustling, always, constantly hustling. You sell yourself, then you sell your company, then you sell your product. And if you do those things, you build enough market steam and enough momentum that somebody else says, it's a build versus buy decision, let's buy these guys instead of building it. Because remember, it's much cheaper for companies to build stuff now.
If I can add to that, I think you talked about preparation, right? If you're lucky enough to get an exit offer, you're going to go through due diligence. So what can you do to prepare yourself? I think it starts really from day one when you're looking for funding, right? Advisory boards, a lot of people start with that. When somebody is doing due diligence, they're going to look at your cap table. So make sure it's clean. That's step one. Advisory boards, a lot of times, if you're building technology, right? Having the right advisory board who knows the network that you're raising money from or getting acquired by, that puts at ease any concerns about technology, especially data or machine learning. Are you deep enough or not? The third is just making sure that you have customers, the way you track them, if you're pre-revenue, what does your letter of intent, etc. look like. I think a lot more deals might die after you get the exit offer than not because you're not prepared enough. So you do have some things in your control.
Just an unpaid ad for Lundstein folks. I mean, we see a lot of, in my current venture, we see, it's all we see are M&A exits, and unfortunately we see a number that don't happen. And I'd say by and large, the ones that don't happen have something to do with kind of it's a legal or contractual problem. And I know startups, I've been in them and everything else, we're all kind of reluctant to spend money on attorneys, but it's really a penny wise and pound foolish approach. You've got to make sure that your capital structure is right. You've got to make sure that your contracts read correctly, the important, people you're doing business with, you're able to kind of transition that to a buyer and everything else. And so it's just, that's where things get hung up, and people just somehow cut a corner somewhere along the way in terms of sort of legal representation that they sought, and it can come back. So I mean, it's really too bad because you've done all the great sort of preparation and performed and everything else, and there you've got an indication of interest from a buyer, and it doesn't come to fruition because of something that on the legal or contractual termination side that just hung everything up.
You can tell Rick is a recovering lawyer.
Unrecovered.
Yeah. I'm not quite there yet, but he's absolutely right. People will do simple things like their most important customer, they'll not have signed the contract. Like they're going to get to it, but they never get to it, and they don't want to mess up the relationship by being too pushy. But you really, if that's one of your principal revenue sources, you need to sign a contract. You don't, and you can't always rely on your brother or your father's, trust estate lawyer or real estate lawyer to do your term sheet. That's not always the best person. Some things I do are very easy, but a lot of things I do seem easy and aren't that easy. And it's very important to, you can overspend, people tell me you can overspend on legal, I don't know how, but shameless plug aside, but certainly when you're pre-revenue, you're pre-revenue. But you do need to make sure that you own your IP, that you're protected, that your basic contracts are executed. It's a plus, it's an add if not only your contract's executed, but they've actually been negotiated a little bit in your favor. But if you don't have legal counsel at that point in your existence, you can at least make sure that they're signed.
So let me just kind of take a little bit of broader perspective to this. So I actually really like the question because it's kind of the net of what is exit and how do you prepare for it and so forth. I think there's sort of two sides to it, and one is simply structural, and we talked a lot about that, and getting your contracts in order, make sure your cap table is clean, you have the right customers and customers are willing to talk good things about you, all that sort of stuff. Advisory group is a part of it. I think the other thing is it's just like the pure soft side of the business as well. So how well that acquirers even know you, and at what stage of the kind of company building process that you start to build those relationships with either potential acquirers or so forth. And I think I would even go even further than that. It's almost as you're building your company, you're not you want to get to know everyone in your ecosystem. So, and a big part of that is almost preparing yourself for building relationships with Amazon and Google, and I kind of go back to some of those kind of more traditional names, or even some of your competitors, and especially where there's an opportunity to partner with someone. Because what's going to happen, and we've seen that over and over again, Amazon is going to buy a company and give that away for free. And all of their competitors are kind of now thinking about how to actually react to it. If you're a startup that were competitive to both Amazon and for whoever they bought, it'll be good for you to know like 7 of their other competitors will be in the position and kind of start those conversations. And those conversations can only happen if you have a relationship with the right folks at the right company. So, and oftentimes the best way to think about it, regardless of the stage of the company, is to get to know kind of broadly speaking your ecosystem and sort of leverage that ecosystem in some capacity. So initially, what you could do right now, you're not going to engage in an acquisition conversation, but you could engage in a go-to-market conversation or some other form of partnership conversation. And the best CEOs that I work with, they've always been at the right stage of the company, kind of jumped in those categories and those sort of those relationships pretty early.
Yeah, and you cannot be prepared enough. I mean, with my last company, I spent the first 3 months of the company preparing the diligence plan. So every time we did anything, we had it documented. We had files and files, 2 3-door filing cabinets full of the most organized diligence you'd ever seen. Go around, Goldman hears about us, we're pitching them, we're like, you could lead our Series A, and then we're on the plane, we're at Dallas Love Field, and they call and they say, we're gonna pass on the round, but we really appreciate you coming out. I was like, no harm, no foul, like, and then they call back, they're like, we weren't done. And they're like, we'll just buy the whole thing. And I was like, we spent 72 hours just trying to get our heads wrapped around that, because we were like, wait, it's a trick. That's true. And then we were like, you know, the diligence process is incredibly hard. You have to listen to what every one of these guys is saying. And I'm not a fan of lawyers, but everything they're saying is true. With all of that preparation, 6 drawers full of everything. I mean, I had background checks from 3 services on every employee. I mean, stuff you can't even imagine the immense amount of time and effort and detail that went into that. And we threw all of that into the diligence process, and they're like, great, check this box. All right, now there's 47 other boxes. And it's very hard because they had so many people, they would send us a question, we'd spend a week pulling all of the data we could for it, send it back, they put 400 bankers on it overnight, and be like, great, next question, right? And so your entire company can get bogged down in this process, even if you're prepared. And by the way, while you're doing that, you could run the risk of you get to the end of the deal, something's not right, deal doesn't happen, and now you've been spending months spending all your employees' time on just the diligence process.
And the morale because of that, because by then the rest of your company knows that you were in the middle of an acquisition, and as a CEO, you got to communicate that to the rest of the company and on, you know, whatever happened, and whether good or bad, or you know, you got to be transparent with that.
And someone needs to be running the business while you're going through this process.
You know, just was thinking about it, and it's just said about networking or whatever we want to call it. But one of my mentors in my professional life gave me one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, which is, you know, show up. Just show up. I mean, when I talk to entrepreneurs, you know, in our transactions who've had, you know, whether they're successful or unsuccessful exits, but they were exits nonetheless, the amount of serendipity that I hear of sort of how they connected, and you know, sure, they're in a particular space, and somebody's buying them is in the same space, and there's some, you know, strategic, you know, imperative there, and you know, symbiosis or whatever you want to call it. It's just how they connected with the opportunity is full of serendipity. So that's, I mean, stuff like this. I mean, just show up, be there, put yourself in position. And
you used to work with Woody Allen? Is it Woody Allen? Is it?
Oh, Woody Allen, sorry.
One thing you keep turning me off. One thing I'd like to hit on a little bit more, and we kind of touched on it as points, is working with advisors and how they can help you with this process. And we've talked a little bit more, I think, on the lawyers, but there's other advisors, like your board members, your advisory board members, your investors. These people are all, Curly's making a face. Yeah, there's so many of them, and I think people on this panel are a great resource for giving you some advice on how they can help, not just with planning for an acquisition, but maybe something that turns into a strategic partnership or turns into a fundraising, or however that might pop up in the acquisition context.
I can take that one. So my startup before I joined Amazon was New Brand Analytics. It was in the social intelligence space. So we had about, I think when I started advising them before I joined as their founding CTO, they had maybe $1,000 in their bank. And we looked at a strategy for how do we get customers, how do we get revenue. I mean, we need to raise money. Let's look at all of those. So we went out, it was in the hospitality space. So we started off by saying, let's look at the top 100 investors, restaurateurs in the hospitality space. We literally went and cold called every one of them. Out of the 100, I think 20 took our call, which is a good rate for a cold call. I think out of the 20, we landed 3. And that 3 eventually grew to about 15 advisors that we got. They were the source of about $1.5 million of our initial capital. They actually landed us our first 10 customers. When eventually NEA came in with about a 25 million round, they were the voice of the customer, and also sort of with the due diligence, they helped us quite a bit. So I think the hustle that you show as an entrepreneur will help you build a board of advisors that will help you with funding, with due diligence, and eventually one of them will actually could look as an exit source too.
So I'm going to take a completely different thing. All due respect to everybody up here who is going to say that I'm wrong on this. How many people think I had 7 people on my board? None of you? How many people think I had 7 people on my board of directors? When I sold the company, 5 people, 3 people, nobody. Yeah, my board is me. That's my fucking company. And here's the deal. I am a network that does that function, right? But I advise entrepreneurs strongly not to have an advisory board, not because the advisors are the value, but because entrepreneurs are horrible. I mean the worst at going, well, I've got an advisory board, he's out there doing that job for me. He's out there doing that job for me. And they don't do any of the work themselves, and then they fail and they wonder why, and they go, we had all these great advisors. It's like, no one will care about your company or work harder for your company than you will. That is your job. That is not your advisory board's job. And so my only kind of counterpoint to that is I've seen so many advisors have these amazing advisory boards, and they're like, well, then I'm done. I have all these amazing.
I think the moral of the story is don't listen to both of us, because he's serial entrepreneur and mine was my third one too.
We're on opposite
so you're on the
sides.
first one, right? But I think that's factual that the advisors are not going to do your job, right? You sort of own all of these steps of doing what you need to.
Yeah, and they're tremendously valuable. Don't get me wrong. For my new project that I'm going to do in a few months, I have some advisors. I still won't put them on advisory board. If they want to get shares or whatever, then they can invest, right? Otherwise, no shares for you. But you have to be careful. That's my only caveat with that is I own so many companies that have amazing advisory boards, like Elon Musk and Bob Metcalf, and just great names, and they're just like, well, Elon's gonna call for it. It's like, he's trying to be a CEO of like 6 companies, which is impossible, by the way, for the record. So I don't think he's gonna be pitching your startup. He sleeps.
Vivek, since you've been actively involved in acqui-hires, what is something or what are the things that you look at when you're looking to acquire a company?
I think when I'm looking to acquire, it's at least from Amazon or some of the big company perspective, now that I'm on the dark side, we're looking at a technology space, specialized skill sets. We're sometimes looking at location plays. Do we want to go into a particular area, and then is there talent there that will help us bootstrap and grow faster? Sometimes it's just, Amazon is growing so fast that we just need to keep up with talent. No one wants to move to Seattle anymore, so that's another thing that we look at when we look at acquisitions, right? So I think it's, I would say the driver is mostly just the growth. How do we keep up with the tech talent to grow versus our ambitions? The second, I think, criteria would be specialized place, whether it's in the hardware side for AWS or other sort of machine learning or deep learning kinds of skill sets. Third is we also look at acquisitions from a diversity perspective. So I think we don't have enough diversity in tech in general. So if there's an acquisition that will help us on that front, we're open to that too.
Isn't there usually something about a management team that also attracts you to the company? And so it's almost obvious that you need to do an acqui-hire because you don't just want the product or the IP. You really want that team, and maybe that team exploits that IP, but then you want them working on some other product or venture or project.
Yeah, that's the specialized skill set, right? Sometimes you go into some spaces and the management team will just have a specialized skill set, domain expertise in there. So we would do an acquisition for that reason too.
To me, the way I think about it, there's some that are purely acqui-hires in a sense that you want to get access to the people that are running the company. But to me, every acquisition kind of comes down to who's the management and who's going to be coming and joining you. I think even a little bit more than broader than that again. So it's as you think about the term exit, it's from an entrepreneur's perspective. It's actually the next step in the journey of building whatever you're building. And I think it's really important to kind of think about that. So it might be the exit of the entity that you are, your XYZ Inc. right now. But if someone like Amazon, and I'm not picking on you, but someone like Amazon or other larger technology companies or non-technology, we talk about different avenues, you will still be going into that entity, but you could still continue to build what you were building before. And maybe you will have better chances of success doing that as well, given that you now have access to resources that Amazon provides, the Salesforce that Oracle or IBM will provide, or so on and so forth. So I think it's sort of a continuum. So almost like, oftentimes when we talk about exits, we kind of get stuck at the point that this is the end of the road. It's actually just one step in the process. And oftentimes the acquirers are thinking like that too, that it's almost like you're acquiring value, but then you want that value to be, because it's an investment in that value, you want that value to be generated multi-X from that point on as well. So
that is an excellent point you just made. The exit is like, think of it like the startup. You got like the stage 1 rocket, and then you got the second stage, and then you're like, I've exited. And here's what you imagine, right? And then I have all this money and all this stuff, and here's what the acquirer imagines. So we'll give them that money over 4 years, 6 years, and if they do anything wrong, like if they don't pass a background check and they don't get any money, right? There's all these things. And it's like that is the best advice up here all night, which is like when you exit, you're just starting over in a new environment. That's really important.
The only people who exit are actually us investors, where you guys are still continuing to build the company and build the product.
And Rick, you see people get their money clawed back from the founder's side too. So you see things that people don't really.
I mean, just look at this crowd. It's a young crowd. I mean, it's not just with that company. I mean, you're gonna live another life someday. I mean, it's this is not this is not the last thing you're going to do in life. And any kind of exit, really any kind of exit for purposes of going forward and doing something else is a successful exit. And even unsuccessful exits or even failures can be a great platform to go on and doing something else. So you're gonna do something else in your life, and this experience is just one of many you're going to have. See that over and over again in our deals. I mean, a lot of the management teams, a lot of the engineering teams they're on at some point they're on to something else, and we even see them on kind of almost a recurring basis, and serial exits. It's incredible.
And a point to that, as an entrepreneur, when I'm selling a company, I'm concerned about one thing above all else, and that is, what does the acquirer think that they're getting? Because if you don't deliver on that, trust me, it's a very small world, and you have another company, and you might not get a chance. I think I'm on this kind of snowball effect with my career with the exits, because I've delivered on what they paid the money for, right? And when you deliver on that, and sometimes it's been more work than I thought, sometimes it's been a lot more painful, and other times it's been super easy. But when they're like, we spent this much money to get this, and we got it, then you've got a lot of friends. They could be funding sources, they could be a lot of things, but you have to deliver on that promise. If you say, well, the deal's closed, and 6 months later I've lost interest, I don't like working at Amazon, because he just seems like a horrible person, like so mean over there. No, I'm just kidding. He's like the nicest Amazon person I've ever met. I'm just kidding. But I've only met him and Jeff Bezos. So, but it's like, if you don't deliver on that, and you leave, you're hurting yourself more than anybody.
Another aspect of that is not just what you're delivering to the acquirer, but also the team that you're selling and your employees that are going with you. So does anybody want to jump in on kind of how to socialize the deal with them and how to make sure that your employees are taken care of and what culture
I'll let
they
one of them
have?
talk about it. I think Nitin mentioned this before too, right? I think a lot of times if you're a founder or an early executive at a startup, always focus on your team morale. Because at the end of the day, most acquirers are looking for well-functioning teams. And if on the day of the exit, half your team is out the door or they're not interested, that'll kill a deal faster than anything, or you won't meet the terms that you sign up for, right? So focus on the people aspect of it. I don't think we talk about that enough at startups.
Yeah, I think as a CEO and senior management team, you kind of have 4 constituents the way I think about it. Your investors, I'm not saying that number 1, but one of your 4. Your employees, your customers, and frankly your own family. And so the way I think about it is that the 3 things that actually stay with it, and again, go back to it, investors are not going to be, they're going to be your friends, but they're not kind of part of that organization as you go forward. The people that are going to be there, it's that your employees, your customers, hopefully your customers will remain, and your own family. So you gotta really think about it, that whatever your outcome that you're preparing for, that all those three are equally prepared for, and whatever your next step in life is going to be. So, and I think the CEOs and the management team that prepare their employees the best kind of have the likeliest success of, frankly, just whatever the next step in the immediate career is, and long term as well. And that's why you see these CEOs kind of come back and start new companies and have the same group of people come back again and over again. It's like, have you done the right thing for the company, for your employees? And that's why you often see this negotiation happen that, yes, Amazon wants to acquire it many times for the management team, but those CEOs kind of fight for their employees and say, well, no, I mean, their contracts need to be appropriately positioned and stuff too, because they're actually kind of making the least amount of money in this whole equation, but they've actually put a lot of effort into it. So I would continue to think about that and also keep them as much in the loop as possible.
And you want to be very open and very transparent, and you're going to not want to do that when you go through an exit, because you're going to think there's going to be things they don't like and they're not going to like hearing. Well, guess what? They could leave right then and it could affect it, or you could close the deal and then they leave and it could affect it in a far worse way. Like, you need to be very open and transparent with your employees, whether it's great or not. I think that when you enter a transaction and you're getting acquired, you go from the chief executive officer making the decisions, to the chief expectation officer, right? And you're making sure everybody in the company knows exactly what is going on at every moment that they need to know. We had meetings every couple of days. We get everybody in one room, be like, okay, this is what we did, and it didn't go great, or this is what we did, it went well, and this is what it means. And every single employee, you have to sit with them, and your employees, they listen to your bullshit, and you're gonna be like, we're giving you 100 million shares out of 1 trillion shares, all right? But that's not how you say it. You say, we give you 100 million shares. You're like, what? You're like, Gesundheit. But you have to be careful, because they have in their head, we're being acquired by this giant entity, we're all rich. And that may not be the case. Maybe they joined 3 months ago. Maybe the vesting is, for my companies, when I start a company, I do stock grants for everybody. There's no vesting, they're in. And I have, different mechanisms to protect the company around that, but they're good. And, one of the expectations I had to set was, I gave you the shares, but when they buy it, they convert you and not give you the shares, because they want to make sure you're there for some period of time, right? Fortunately, with both of the bigger deals I've done, that wasn't a very long period of time. It was like almost 6 months, almost a year, right? But you have to set that expectation, because if you don't, they're going to get really pissed off. And the last thing you need is an upset group of employees in the middle of a transaction. And by the way, if they're pissed off, it's probably your fault, so they probably have a right to be.
I think we have one more question, and
No
then we're going to have
questions
to wrap
from
up.
venture capitalist named John. I think that's a general rule. Was that not a panel rule?
I'm curious your thoughts on accepting strategic investment, like taking investment from Amazon, say, as a startup, and how that helps or hurts a potential acquisition.
Let me take a quick crack at that. So it's great. Having strategic investors, they're as welcome on the cap table. The one thing I would caution you is, if there's an element of multi-platform dependency on your product or your technology, and taking investment, if there's a risk that taking investment from one of those will counter your benefits or partnership with others, then you have to be exceptionally careful of. I think, and the perfect example is Microsoft and Salesforce, actually, because they're both deep into CRM, and if your product has your platform independent of both of them, and you take investment from one and that spooks out the other, I mean, you kind of got rid of 50% of your business. I think that's a number one. So it's more of a business consideration more than anything else, but otherwise, yeah, they can open up doors into a bunch of other options, frankly.
I treat strategic investment like every other investment. Investors are not your friends, they're not your partners, they're not your employees. The word is investor. And some strategic investments will come with some strings attached to them that say, we have this right or that right. They can ruin other options on getting investment. You have to treat every deal with the same amount of diligence. There's a bunch of good that can come with it, with getting a strategic investor or a name investor, but there's a bunch of bad that can come with it as well. Not just what he's talking about, but they may, their whole strategy may be to sprinkle, your strategic investor, for example, is not bound to only invest in you. So I have a startup that transacted last year that had a strategic investor who invested in 18 other things like them. They only put like 250 grand into each one. And so when it got time to do the deal, they were like, right, but we've also seen these other 18 things. And they also put in hooks that said, as a strategic investor, they put in one simple thing. They said, we have the right of first refusal on your next round. And the guys were like, yeah, that sounds great. And then they were like, hey, we've got a round, so we need you to go ahead and refuse that so we can do it. And they're like, no, we think we'd like to buy you cheap. And they're like, well, no, that's not where. And they're like, oh, you should read those documents.
You have to read the documents.
Always. Don't agree to that? Okay.
Or have Lowenstein read it for you.
I think we need an answer from Kathy on that one, because she used to be at Intel Capital, and she's really good at giving advice on strategic investments. So Kathy, you've got to answer that one for John, and then we'll wrap this one up. I think we need an answer from you.
We're pulling the audience.
So I'm not speaking from the perspective of my former employer at all. I haven't been there for more than 9 years. So, but strategic investors are they're the double-edged sword. You shouldn't necessarily consider them good or bad, and I don't think they're quite as evil as Forley thinks they are. Just that one. But it is something that just to get the business or the money, it doesn't make sense to take money with that many strings. And strategic investors are notorious for changing their direction. And so you may take a lot of money from, or a small amount of money from a strategic investor with some really big hooks, and then they have a down quarter and they're a public company and you are toast. And they don't care, but it doesn't mean they're not going to be difficult in your next round, or difficult when you decide to sell to someone else who may or may not be their competitor. And I saw it happen. Never Intel, of course, because they were always the best behaved strategic investor ever. But look, I also represent a lot of strategic investors just because, when you're in private practice and you used to work for Intel Capital, they think you know something. But I do warn them when they ask for the really heavy duty provisions that in fact what you're doing is more harm than good. And a lot of strategics take that to heart. There are some that don't, and I've seen things go really bad. But don't enter it blindly. Talk to somebody who's dealt with that strategic investor before, or a lawyer who's negotiated an M&A transaction for one of their portfolio companies, not for them, and it will help you a lot. It's a double-edged sword.
All right. Well, thank you for the guest answer. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. So one of the things we love about these events are all of the great conversations that are had and the connections that are made. We're going to take a quick pause, let you continue conversations from earlier, make some new friends, grab a nibble, grab a drink, and then we're going to shuffle folks back over here in about 20 minutes or so
But don't forget to come back and listen to our fabulous panel on user data
privacy,
data privacy, and monetization of user data.
And there's amazing panelists. So.
Yes, including Nitin Chopra, who happens to, he's not leaving. He's just going to be here all day, all night.